Hello YouTube, and to all the people on the interweb. This is Kilowatt Delta 9 Charlie Tango Sierra with a quick video on a Crosley 62 TD. This particular radio was made around 1942 and was in my grandpa's garage for a long time when my dad was a kid. It hasn't worked in quite some time, and I wanted to get it ready and working for him by Father's Day this year of 2017, but it just didn't happen because parts didn't come in time. But I have it working now, and wanted to show you what I did with it, what it took to get it working, and just share with you my my dad's late or belated Father's Day present. The speaker was blown. There's not much left of it. So I had to replace it with a modern speaker, a permanent magnet speaker, which you can see here. The original speaker was a field coil speaker. So in order to make this work in place of that, you had to give something for the electricity going to the old field coil to do. You had to have something to keep it occupied. So you had to put in, if you can see them here, these two white things. They are 20 watt, 2 kilo ohm resistors wired in series. That's just working the energy or the electricity that the field coil would be using, because from there it goes to the output audio circuit. And so you have to have something there to make things right. The tubes actually tested either good to fair. Put them on the tube tester, and believe it or not, they are not in need of replacement. There's one, actually, the audio output tube, that it tested the least good, and that's to be expected because the capacitors underneath the chassis, which we'll get to here in a second, capacitors were leaking, as they all do from that period of time. They leak terribly, and they're about the size of a AA battery, most of them, and they start to leak wax and generally look unpleasant, and they stop becoming, or they stop being capacitors and start acting like resistors, which sends too much current to the tube here. So let's flip this thing up, if I can do it here. And I apologize if I sound wheezy. The allergies and the allergies is just killing my asthma, and it didn't help that I just mowed the yard. So if I sound wheezy, don't worry about me. But anyhow, as you can see, the old capacitors are gone. They've been replaced with polypropylene capacitors everywhere you see one. These are all added by myself here. The resistors tested in spec, or pretty close to it, so we just let them go. One thing that you might want to know, if you're ever going to do something like this, you can replace a capacitor with a capacitor of the same value, as long as, and the voltage can be different, as long as you put in a capacitor that's rated for a higher voltage, you're okay. So if you had a 0.5 microfarad capacitor that was rated at 200 volts, you'd be just fine to put in a capacitor of a 0.5 microfarad rated at 400 volts or 600 volts. You won't hurt a thing. As a matter of fact, I needed a 0.5 and 0.3 microfarad capacitor. I'm sorry, a 50 and 30 microfarad capacitor. Excuse me, I'm tripping over my own words here. And all I had was these two 100 microfarad capacitors. They're rated at a much higher voltage than what I needed, but they were handy and they fit, so they will work. These things are pretty forgiving as long as you put a replacement capacitor in that's rated at a higher voltage, and if you don't have an exact match as far as the capacitance, go a little higher, and these things are pretty forgiving. And I can tell you from experience that they are, because this radio works great. I was told that you got quite a bit of wiggle room as long as you go up by somebody that's done many of these radios. And he was right. The proof's in the pudding. They're pretty forgiving. So anyhow, before I get this all put back together, we're going to test it out. Now, this radio picks up the foreign and American broadcast band. And the foreign broadcast band, you can see here, 40 meters. What's 40 meters? If you're a ham, you know that that's a ham band as well. It kind of crosses over. So when my dad and my Uncle Johnny were kids, they'd go out to Grandpa's garage and they would turn this thing on. They'd hear Morse code. They thought they were listening to submarines. I hate to tell them, but it was actually just hams. But anyhow, let's turn her on. Let's see what happens. Light comes on. Let's put the antenna up here. This is the loop antenna here. This loop antenna is actually for the foreign broadcast band. The American broadcast band is lower frequency, so therefore it requires a longer antenna, which I put a longer antenna on the back of it. Just a piece of wire. Kind of ran it around here, and it works pretty good. So, let the tubes warm up. We'll go to the American band. That's WLS out of Chicago. We'd be picking it up a lot better if we had this antenna outside, or most of it outside. It's a good receiver. Having a little bit of trouble because the antenna's outside, or inside rather. We go to the foreign broadcast band. And when you go to the foreign broadcast band, you're going to pick up more preachers than you can shake a rosary at.
de seguridad nacional. Esto supone una gran renovación para la prueba de origen de Wilfredo.
Send a self-addressed business-sized envelope or one IRC to Program Schedule. World Harvest.
Anyhow, you can see that it works. So, happy Father's Day, Dad. Even though it's almost 2 weeks late. But I got her going for you. I love you. Now go out to the garage and listen to submarines.